Today, very, very happy to finally get Steve, who is a cybersecurity expert, amongst many other things, on the show. So me and Steve are obviously going to do what we always do here and just sit down, have a good, interesting conversation, and hopefully give you guys as much value as possible. So Steve, how are you today, brother?
I'm doing well, thanks, Michael, and thank you for having me on.
No, you're more than welcome. Pleased to have you. Finally, I know that we've been trying to get this one for a couple of weeks, so at least we finally managed to schedule it in. But you're sat there, you're by the pool, just chilling, minding your own business, having a good time, whilst a lot of cybersecurity experts are working very, very, very hard at the moment, especially with this whole Russia-Ukraine situation, Europe and everything else. What's your general take on that at the minute? Is that something that we kind of need to be a little bit concerned about, or is it just a fart in the wind?
Well, with respect to the Ukraine and Russia situation, you know, people talk about from time to time, they'll have the cyber war aspect of that, the virtual part of that. And sometimes it can be pretty sexy. Sometimes it can make a headline, get some attention, maybe if there's a lull going on somewhere. But the kind of cyber activities at a nation state level, they're always going on. There's a constant chatter of things that are going on. And I would say it's a virtualized version of where you're looking at companies or countries operating intelligence programs. It's just another type of intelligence, except it takes place in the virtual space.
Yeah, because it's a lot of people don't see behind the veil, right? And a lot of people just kind of consider just on a day-by-day basis. They're like, oh, everything's fine. You know, we're not at war. But I think a lot of people kind of overlook the fact that actually pretty much every country is always on a constant, either it's an offensive thing or it's a defensive thing, right? And a lot of people sort of overlook, you know, what's just going on. I mean, why do you think that so many people just don't even have the slightest clue as to what's going on in the space at all?
I think it stems from a general lack of awareness because it doesn't impact them on a day-to-day basis. You know, they go about their business, they go about their day. If they see it on the news, especially if they're not physically or geographically close to what's going on, then it's just a matter of how it doesn't affect them on a day-to-day basis. So why should they be concerned? And that's beside the fact that, you know, there's technology involved, and sometimes the techno mumbo jumbo and voodoo is it's just not easily relatable.
Yeah, well, certainly there's that part for a lot of people, because especially, you know, the older generation, let's say, I mean, it's hard enough for them to figure out how to use TikTok or even just their phones, right? So I mean, how long have you been in the space for? Because, I mean, obviously, you know very well what you're talking about, or you've had a few conversations, but how long have you actually been in the cybersecurity space for, and how did that start?
I broke into the cybersecurity space in 1999, and I didn't expect to be here. I didn't expect to stay here, but one thing led to another, and here I am. I started my career off as a software developer. I was a C programmer and wrote code. And I did that for about 7 years, and then decided that I didn't want to stay in that space long term, and found my way in an organization as a project manager. And the first 3 projects that I led were cybersecurity related software implementations. So that covered about 1.5 years, 2 years for those first 3 projects. And I found myself in a situation where I said, you know, look, do I want to make this a career, or do I want to stay kind of doing what I've been doing from a project management perspective? And clearly I decided to stay in the security and the privacy, the risk management space. And so I've been doing that continuously since 1999.
Geez, because I'm just trying to even think back that far. I mean, it's kind of hard for me even to think what was going on in that kind of a day and age, because I was super young even back then. I was probably still learning how to walk still, you know. But how do you keep up? Because I mean, I've got 40 something qualifications in IT myself, and security is impossible to keep up with. How do you just keep things going?
Yeah, you have to have a system. That's what I've found that works for me. One is in the security space, you've got a lot of different vertical domains, a lot of different subject matter areas. And there's no way you can go 10,000 feet deep in every domain. And so you've got to pick what you think is of interest and or in demand. You got to figure out what makes what you decide is in your wheelhouse and really become an expert in that. But then you've got to maintain touch with what's going on. And so as an example, in the last few days, there's been a somewhat of a landmark legal case that's been decided, and the former CISO of Uber was found guilty of obstructing justice in terms of an FTC, a Federal Trade Commission investigation with goings on in Uber back in 2014. And what I saw right away in catching up to what's going on with that story is there's kind of two camps, very similar to politics. There's one that says this guy's the fall guy, and there's another one that says, this guy actually committed a crime. And so it's such a topic of awareness in the space. Then part of my day then becomes to figure out what the facts are, what the opposing sides are, and then what my perspective is. And so that allows me then to make germane discussions or comments about that as my clients would expect me to have a perspective on a lot of things like that. So, you have to pick your spots where you're going to be the expert, but then you do have to have a system in place so that you can maintain touch and contact with what's going on du jour.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to just cybersecurity, I mean, that's always a massive thing is being aware of the surroundings, your surroundings, and just what the hell is going on in the space, right? But at the same time, don't you think that it's kind of the same as everything? It's a similar case to most things, right? Because in life, you can choose a certain study or a certain thing that you're going to devote your life to. And in order to just devote your life to that thing or that specific area, then eventually you start saying, oh, okay, actually, there's kind of different sub spaces in this. And you can master a couple of those spaces, like master a couple of things in your life. Like it's very, very rare that anyone would be let's say a chess grandmaster and then an international MMA fighter, right? Like there's two kind of conflicting things. But when it comes to cybersecurity and just security online as a whole, I mean, I find it fascinating because there's so many different cross sections that are so similar. Do you think it's kind of the same thing with life just overall?
I'd say that's fair. One of the things that I've had to figure out, and again, it's an extension of what I talked about in what's the area of expertise, but being able to stack different skills as you go and pick them up. And you certainly don't have to master them, right? It's a matter of, I think somebody said in the first 20 hours that you study a topic is probably where your learning curve starts to flatten out, right? So give it a good go, understand it, be able to be knowledgeable about it, and then leave the heavy lifting to the experts, the people that really spend the 10,000 hours to master whatever that topic is.
Yeah, definitely. And I was having this conversation actually just the other day with a friend of ours actually, and I was saying exactly the same thing, that after those first 20 hours, 30 hours, then it just becomes the minute details and the very, very rare circumstances that if this happens, then you need to know about this, right? I mean, so what would you say would be like the biggest thing, like the biggest starting point when it comes to just being safe online? What would you say would be the biggest starting point for someone?
Being safe online is really, I think, a function of maintaining the security of your system or device that you're accessing the online systems with. And don't get me wrong, there can be a lot to securing a particular device, but at the highest level, if your device is something that you can't trust the security posture of, then you're off base from the start. But when I think about it from just a personal security perspective, I think of three things. One is make sure that you've got your system that you're using. We'll just call it your PC, could be a phone, whatever the case may be. Make sure you've got that thing patched up, and make sure that you are validating or vetting the sites that you're interacting with when it comes to anything financial, anything involved with your personal data. Make sure you're vetting those sites. And then I would say the other thing then becomes making sure you're leveraging and using strong authentication for any system that you have. It could be a web-based mail service, it could be a cloud service, could be a financial site online. But that strong authentication usually involves some factor of two-factor authentication or 2FA. And when I think of personal security, those would be the three things that I think of.
And for us donkeys who don't understand what 2FA is, could you just explain that a little bit in layman's terms for us?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So two-factor authentication is meaning that you're using two factors to authenticate or to log yourself into a website. That's a common way to look at it. And when we talk about factors, there are three ways that you can authenticate yourself. It's something that you know, something that you are, or something that you have. And so in the case of turning on strong authentication or two-factor authentication on, let's say, your Google email, you have an ID and a password. Those are things that you know. It's a one collection, but it's one thing that you know. That's one factor. And then a second factor would be to maybe have a SMS authentication required, a short message service, which is just a text message, so that when you try to log in, the website would send you a text message to your phone with a one-time use code. And that proves that you have control over that phone. So that's something that you have. So between your ID and password, one factor, the fact that you have control over your phone is a second factor. It's something you know, something you have. Two factors stronger than one factor. If I find out your ID and your password, and you don't have another factor required to get access to your email, then I've got access to your email. If you have a second factor and you have control of that second factor, I can get your ID and password all day. I have no access to your website. So that second factor is critical for protecting your online presence.
For sure. And so when it comes to different factors, and obviously we can get all crazy and start talking about, as you said, about what you are or something that you are, and talk about biometrics and all of that kind of stuff as well. But right. When it comes to, a lot of, especially now, the vetting that I think most people can do is actually just with their own eyes. This, embarrassingly, that I lost, I can't even remember. It was a pretty significant amount of money. It was enough for a small car, let's say, brand new, just the other week, because I was rushing something. And I got sent this website, looked legitimate, and it was for an investment in a specific cryptocurrency. And me being super rushed and super busy, I just do a couple of normal clicks. And then obviously, with it being crypto, adios to monies. And it's never fun. It's never fun.
It hurts.
Yeah. It's painful, man. It was a bad Tuesday, I'll say that much. But had worse. But for those guys that are in crypto, because I know that a lot of the audience that watches this podcast are very much, heavily invested into that sort of metaverse. Sure. What can those guys do?
Well, I like to say there's 5 keys to DeFi security, and that comes from a book that I just released earlier this year. It's called Securing Wallets, 5 Keys to DeFi Security. So I'm glad you asked, Michael.
I didn't know about the book, but I will put this down in the description. I'll put a link to it so that you guys can buy it.
All right, that's great. Yeah, and thank you. So the biggest thing you can do to protect your wallet is to protect your recovery seed. That's number one. I'll go through 5 and then we can talk about them in detail. So it's protect your recovery seed. Use 2FA, two-factor authentication, for anything around your wallet, whether it be a centralized exchange account or your email account, or any kind of website that's associated with protecting pieces or parts in and around your ecosystem or your wallet. So use 2FA. The third one then is to make sure that any kind of interaction you have with a person or a website or a DApp, a decentralized application, that you take the time to make sure that you vet them and that you know that they are the person that they claim to be, or that they are the website that they claim to be, and it's not a fake site. It's not a person pretending to be somebody that they're not, and things like that. So validate the people and the apps and the tech that you are working with. The fourth one would be, anytime you're going to conduct a wallet transaction, you're going to approve a transaction in your wallet, you absolutely have to make sure that you've done your research and you know exactly what's going to happen when you approve that wallet transaction. And then the fifth item is to have and to follow a concentration risk management methodology. Those are the big 5 things.
And elaborate on the last one, because a lot of guys, I mean, my mistake seems, I'm sure that many of you guys kind of just probably laughing at me, but it seems like a very obvious thing. But especially if you're rushed and busy, as most of the guys that watch this, you are, how does that number 5 look from practice?
Yeah, so concentration risk mitigation, concentration risk. Let's talk about that for a minute. This is the proverbial putting all of your eggs in one basket. So if you have eggs, you put them all in one basket. If you lose your basket, your eggs are gone. If conversely, you spread your eggs that you have around 5 baskets, and if you lose one basket, you've still got 80% of your eggs, assuming they were spread and evenly distributed. So concentration risk management in the DeFi world or in the crypto world is you spread your tokens, you spread your digital assets across multiple wallets, multiple systems, multiple staking websites. And really, there's no magic formula for what that distribution looks like. It's really up to you. Like, what is your risk profile? If you have 6 figures and all that you have in your crypto environment is 6 figures of crypto, then if you store that 6 figures of crypto in the same place, in the same wallet, in the same address, on the same centralized exchange, even on the same cold storage, then if that storage mechanism gets compromised, then it's all at risk. And so concentration risk is simply looking at it and saying, you know what? Here's all of the tokens that I have. I'm going to put some tokens in this wallet, some tokens in this wallet. I'm going to store some other tokens over here. And now if you lose access to one of those environments, you still haven't lost all of your tokens, right? You've lost what you would deem to be an acceptable amount of tokens based on your risk profile.
Makes perfect sense. And I mean, one of the things I've actually recently been thinking about doing, which I'd love to get your opinion on this, is about not only just having all of my tokens just across different wallets, which I have done since the first wallet that I had did get compromised and lost everything that I had in crypto that time. That was a big learning lesson. Obviously not big enough. I know, I can hear everyone screaming at me through the thing. But when it comes to also having them not only in just different wallets, but also having them in completely different networks with completely different tokens across as many different networks as well. Because one of the things that I've been considering recently is what happens if one of these networks does invariably go down. Like, look at, I think it was Solana today. or yesterday, when sort of the entire network just went to crap again. And what do you think of that as a strategy at the moment?
I think that works as good as any. And Michael, the example I would give you is, if you're going to be, let's say, staking in DeFi, then you're going to be accepting a different kind of risk than if you're just holding a token somewhere. And so, and then there's a little bit of what I would call a contradiction, and it matches up with the thing that I know in security in particular, which a lot of times increasing security can be a trade-off in something else, a trade-off in productivity, trade-off in ease of use. And so what the contra is that a lot of times in DeFi, to get that, 1,000, 10,000x, you actually need to have some concentration in that area. And so there's a little bit of a conflict, right? Because we're not trying to drive away all risk. We're operating, we're in business, we have to accept risk. And so it's just about managing it down to a threshold. So I would say, if you feel like you're invested in the Binance Smart Chain and you feel like that's at risk, then clearly, go play in the Avalanche space, or go play in the Ethereum space, or Solana space. And if you feel like that based on the way you're operating, what your risk profile is, if you feel like you have exposure too much to one chain, then absolutely diversify across different chains. If you feel like you have too much exposure to one token, then diversify across different tokens. It's really looking at your particular situation. You've got the kind of the high level, let's talk about concentration risk, but then what's diversification for you may not be diversification for me, depending on how I'm playing.
Really, really good point, actually, because everyone's risk tolerance is very, very different. I mean, me personally, depending on even which type of investment I'm getting involved in, if I'm really and truly investing into a project, normally I'm looking at that as, maybe anywhere between 6 months to a year in the DeFi space. But then again, at the same time, if I'm looking for those, 10, 100 X's, you're damn right I'm going to be losing all of my money in shit coins, which is, don't get me wrong, it's fun, right? You wake up after going to sleep, you've just made 50 grand on like $1,000. But you win some and you lose some. It's all very, fundamentally, it just comes down to someone's risk tolerance, right? I mean, what's you don't mind me asking, what's your kind of sway when it comes to crypto at the moment? Because obviously, I believe it was today, in fact, where the EU has just now said, right, all of the keys, any Russian Bitcoin keys and Ethereum keys are now untransactionable within the EU. So what's your current thought process on where crypto is kind of looking and going?
Well, I bought my first crypto. I bought back in 2017. I bought some Ethereum, some Bitcoin, of course, some Litecoin, and then I think I dipped my toe in XRP and Stellar Lumens.
Oh wow!
And then when the next bear market hit, I just stopped paying attention to it, and it just all left sitting there. And so, and then comes 2020, the summer of DeFi, and that's when things got exciting again. And there was a gentleman who's connected to a group that you and I are participating in. His name is Jonathan. Thank you, Jonathan. Jonathan gave me
amazing guy, amazing and exceptionally helpful.
Absolutely,
a lot of us.
Absolutely. And so Jonathan said something about maybe you should buy some cake. And I said, what the hell is cake? And he goes, just look into it. And so things got really exciting after that. That's how I cut my teeth really into the DeFi space. And so we're a couple years in now from there, and the market's been up, it's been down, it's been up, it's down now. The one thing that it's clear to me is that the centralized exchanges are, it's really the only place that the government has to go to for regulatory control of crypto.
Mm.
And so, to your point, when the authorities announced that if your wallet is tangled up or sourced, in or has roots in Russia or ties to Russia, then we're not going to let you transact on on our platform or in our country or whatever the case may be. The control point there is the centralized exchanges, and so that plays into your concentration risk profile, that plays into your day-to-day profile. I personally wouldn't store tokens on an exchange unless I had a very good reason to do that. And often an exchange will give you some kind of a benefit, motivate you to store tokens there. And so if that benefit isn't beneficial to me, it may be beneficial to you, but if it's not beneficial to me, then I'm staying away from that. But if I get some kind of benefit from it, then I have to weigh the risk and the reward. What are they going to do? Are they going to take your tokens? No, but they could shut down your wallet. They could shut down your wallet. They could keep you from transacting. They could freeze your tokens, essentially. A lot of times they'll come up with a story that says, hey, we're doing this to protect you. Really, they're doing it to protect themselves. Maybe there's a liquidity crunch on some kind of a tier that they have. And so when I look at it, I say it does a couple things. One is recognize that the centralized exchanges are the control point for government control of cryptocurrency. One. Two, because they're also now marking and I guess able to mark a wallet as tainted for whatever, for however you want to define that, which essentially means you can't transact in some regions, territories, exchanges, then you just have to take care and change the way you operate a little bit when you're moving your tokens around. And again, it's not because of doing anything illegal. That's not it at all. It's a matter of maintaining sovereignty over your cryptocurrency assets. And an ability to do that, the freedom of that sovereignty comes with a little bit of a let's say an OPSEC price.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And it certainly comes with the freedom and ability to interact. It of course it comes with I always say it's essentially the same kind of responsibility, metaphorically speaking, Steve. It's essentially the same as just transacting with cash, right? Like if I want to go ahead and send you 70K right now, like sure, I could go and I could do that with cash, but I don't really want a bag of 70 grand just to walk around with. So, okay, am I going to send that to you through a bank and have that completely traceable, where in your case, obviously the IRS are going to come after you, ask you a ton of questions. I'm going to get asked a ton of questions by HMRC. Do I want to be doing that? Or do I just want to say, hey, let me go ahead and send you this money super quick, super easy. Let that be completely sovereign to you, just as that bag of 70K would be. But it's having that same responsibility, because if you have 70K and that's just in one metaphorical bag of eggs, and that something happens to that, yeah, you're screwed. And it's exactly the same with crypto. Yep. So, I mean, obviously being a pretty, I would say a reasonably early adopter to crypto, especially for most people, when it comes to the next big thing, I think you are going to have a really interesting insight, because we certainly agree on so many things when it comes to the freedom and knowing about the responsibility that you have. But what else do you think is going to be something really, really big and valuable in general for the crypto world, which may be carrying around that 70,000 in a bag of cash analogy? So what would be the next biggest thing that you could see happening to crypto that would make it even more valuable and even easier for people to use?
Oh, a couple of things come to mind, completely unrelated. One is central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, and where that's going to go. And so, I think for maybe the viewers, just a quick CBDC and what is it? Central bank digital currency. Today, the United States government produces U.S. dollars, and they have all the regulations in and around those U.S. dollars, and how they're used, and taxes, and all that encompasses, that entire infrastructure. In the future, they'll issue a United States dollar central bank digital currency. I don't know what they'll call it. They'll come up with some kind of sexy name, and they'll be looking to adopt that as the main course of currency, or the driving currency for the country. Essentially, to quote unquote replace the U.S. dollar. It essentially operates like a U.S. dollar, but then they'll replace it. We're not far off of that right now, other than the institution that is currencies of sovereign governments. Because if you think about it, we use our credit cards, our debit cards everywhere, and so that's essentially the money moves around digitally behind the scenes, anyways. That's going to make crypto adoption easier, simpler. However, that comes with a dark side, because that currency is programmable and would be subject to, let's say, availability or usage limitations in whatever manner the government saw fit. So, for example, if they decide that your carbon footprint is something that they want to manage and push down to individual citizens, then they're going to be tracking maybe the fact that you bought 2 airline tickets last month and you consumed 15 pounds of ground beef. And if they decide that flying in a plane is bad for the carbon footprint, and consuming beef is bad for the carbon footprint, you might not be able to buy the next tank of gas, because your central bank digital currency, your US dollar equivalent of digital currency, is tied to a credit card. It doesn't work at the gas pump for you until some amount of time expires and you have an additional allotment of it. So I craft that example just to say, I think central bank digital currency is going to lead to a broader adoption, but I also think it could come at quite a bit of a price of privacy, freedom, influence of whatever the social agenda of whatever the presiding government is.
I think it terrifies the fuck out of me. I can't put it any other way. Genuinely terrifies me, because I've sort of delved into this monstrously big, as you know, the rabbit hole is here, and how far could they go? It's very dystopian, but at the same time, I mean, I think that everyone should be aware and can see, the dangers of where this road leads, right? Because fundamentally, I mean, just like with any kind of a crypto, that you can build a smart contract on a network. I think this was maybe last year, I came up with the idea that essentially, imagine what would happen if you now have smart contracts with everything, right? So you have a smart contract with your job employment. Mm-hmm. Part of that contract says that online or offline, you can now say nothing bad about that company ever, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you make a post on Twitter saying that your boss is a dick, and oh, okay, now that smart contract is in breach. Okay, what happens if that smart contract that you have for your work is then tied even further to the home that you're renting? Oh, hold on a second. Now your landlord knows that you have no cash coming through the door, so they're going to kick you out. And part of your smart contract there, and it can just spiral and spiral and spiral into just this insanely terrifying dystopian future. Yeah, which I think, I mean, we can go down the rabbit hole, because this could be fun for a lot of the guys watching. But how far do you think it could go? I mean, have you ever considered or played or toyed with even the idea that maybe crypto as a whole was just built so that governments can see, oh, okay, this person is open to this kind of idea, and great, now we know who they are and let's track them.
Yeah, the idea that you're describing is that social credit score, and having the government, grant you or restrict access to things based on, your compliance with whatever the government, standards are. Are you a John Wick?
Love him, love it.
So remember in John Wick, and for those who haven't watched John Wick, it's what you might call a globally organized group of assassins. It's more than assassins,
hitmen,
and they have their own terminology. They have their own protocols, and the currency within that organization is a gold coin, gold tokens, right? That's how they conduct commerce within that group. And so I almost think of, you think of right now, Bitcoin, Ethereum, USDC, USDT, right? Like you mentioned earlier, if you and I wanted to transact, it would be very simple, very quick and immediate for you and I to transact using some kind of digital currency. And then the government is working diligently to figure out ways to keep that from happening, right? So that they can get the regulatory control of that. So in some ways, it almost feels like maybe digital currency, or the way that we're using it today, as the government starts to tighten the controls and the standards, and things get a little more mature in that space, you end up with there's still global networks that are able to transact in kind of what you would call the native or the basic or the fundamental set of cryptocurrency tokens.
And it could go, so I mean, we're going down a really big rabbit hole with Gaddafi and the whole lira situation. What was it? The gold dinar. Like, we know that the US government really doesn't want the rest of the world to be dealing with anything other than the US dollar. And as we've seen over the past couple of weeks, what's happened with the dollar milkshake theory, which is, for those that don't know, I said this was going to be a rabbit hole, Steve, and here we are.
For sure.
But it's essentially the more that fiat currencies, i.e. The pound, the Chinese yuan, the euro, the Russian ruble, etc., the currencies of governments, the more in which those currencies drop and lower in price, the higher the demand is going to be for the US dollar. Why? Simply enough, just because their currency is worth shit, so they want to do and transact in dollars, right? For many reasons, to keep their own currency from tumbling even more into the plethora of bullshit that is inflation and deflation, because both are just as bad as one another. But as we see now, there's more and more transactions happening on all of these networks, and the governments are like, well, hold on a second, there's no real sort of head of the snake now that we can cut off. Okay, well, maybe it's a if you can't beat them, join them kind of a thing, right? I mean, what do you think of that kind of a theory?
You're saying just in terms of having to kind of kowtow to that?
Yeah.
I mean, we have to operate. There's a certain amount of, I guess, the matrix world where we have to operate, within those confines to some degree. Some of it's related to, our own wealth, right? There's a direct relation between the amount of wealth we've been able to amass versus being able to operate more independently than not. But you've got folks that are pretty staunch in the live off the grid. I think I think we're probably aligned in that you really, to counter the government reach for control, the counter to that might be get on as many grids as you possibly can, right? And so play the games, know what the game is, play the game, know how to manage the game, but then not lose sight of what what your ultimate individual goals are. I don't know if that answers or gives my.
No, perfectly answers, and it introduces another really interesting idea, because a lot of people think that they're able to just go pack up all of their belongings, go with an axe, a machete, and a hunting knife, and maybe even a crossbow or a bow and arrow, hop up into the mountains down in Colorado or in the Swiss Alps somewhere, and hunt for a living, drink the fresh water in the spring, and live like that. You can't, right?
Yeah.
It's impossible in this day and age. It's impossible,
and definitely not at scale, and definitely in a lone wolf type mode, right? You need a community before something like that even becomes anything like viable.
100%. I mean, when it comes to like the community and the kind of guys that you hang around with, I know that we're very, very similar, and we've got a lot of friends in common as well. But what do you think is like a really important thing for building a community, or how would you ideally build your sort of your tribe?
I've given this some thought, and I think we've got just in the common circles we run in, we've got some great examples and some guiding principles around that. But I think making sure that you have a framework for success and the behaviors that roll up to those different successes in a diverse set of areas, right, for success. And a lot of that can be defined in a lot of different ways, but from a community perspective, it's having those common bonds, those common beliefs, those common goals, and it starts with that, and then ultimately, like with any organization, I think when you get into survival mode organization, like we're talking about, there's people that are bringing value, and there's people that talk about bringing value and can't quite figure out value.
Yeah.
You've got that common set of framework, goals, and ideas, and that the people there are continually striving to provide value along those lines. Now you've got a pretty good start for, a tight community or the beginnings of a good, strong tribe.
Yeah, because it kind of, it most certainly beautifully just comes back to the first point that we were talking about. Even ties into cybersecurity, whereas there are all of these different sort of areas and subsets of life, and if you're going to dedicate yourself to one area of that, then great, that's fantastic. That's your place in the tribe, right? But then it's like, hold on a second, Steve, what do you know about, I don't know, if you're the hunter, okay, you may be fantastic with hunting, but okay, how much do you know about which of these berries is going to kill us?
That's right.
And it's I think a lot of guys, especially now, they kind of really struggle with not just being the top guy all of the time, and then what they try and do is try to be the top guy in every aspect, rather than just kind of saying, well, hey, this is my lane and I'm just going to kind of stick here. What do you think that you would advise for someone that's just trying to, I guess, not find their discipline, but because if in that case, I would obviously say, and I'm sure that you would agree, if someone's trying to find the thing that they're good at and that they want to become disciplined in, then yeah, try as many different things as possible until you find the thing that you're like, yeah, cool, this thing sticks. But for those that have done that up until that point, and then they have the thing that sticks, what would your advice be for that person if they start questioning, well, maybe I should go into this other field. Maybe I should start picking these wild berries and eating them myself, and I'll find out.
Yeah, the question has me thinking of a couple of things, Michael. One is, you talked about guys that struggling with not being able to be the expert in a certain field. I think one thing that I find out that I've learned or I've observed over time is it says a lot about an individual with how they react to their insecurities. You know, so when you have, let's say you have somebody who maybe they don't deal well with not being, the expert in, across 12 domains. It's like, okay, well, you might need to go and have some self-introspection there, right? Set some realities and reevaluate kind of what you've done or kind of your outlook or your perspective, your mindset. The other thing it reminds me of is that if you've got something, right, you've got the expert or the master level people at their crafts. And so I think we've all probably heard that if you spend 10,000 hours training in some area, it takes 10,000 hours to master a thing. And then I would look at that and say, okay, well, what if somebody spent 5,000 hours at something? Maybe they're not a master, but they're probably an expert, or they've developed certain levels of expertise. And so when I think of then what that means from how to get to an expert or master level, if we work a job 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, right? That prototypical full-time equivalent person, it's just over, but let's say 2,000 hours a year. So at 2,000 hours a year focused on becoming an expert in a thing, then to get to that 10,000 hours, it's 5 years. Let's say to get halfway there, it's 2.5 years. So let's just say 2 to 3 years you need to spend becoming an expert. Maybe that's in an apprenticeship to become what they might call in the trades a journeyman. When I think about those two things, right, how people deal with their lack of expertise or their inferiority complex because they've got some things that they're exposed at. They probably have never spent the time and worked hard enough to become even just at an expert level of something. Because once you become an expert at something, the journey that it took, the hard work that it took. You made sacrifices. You woke up and you did things you didn't want to do that day because they had to be done. Once you become an expert, it's almost like you've crossed this threshold into now you know what to do to become that expert again. You go become an expert in something else. And so I would look at it and say, for anybody, become an expert at something, right? Don't worry about becoming an expert at 12 things until you become an expert at one.
Yeah.
And then once you know what it takes to become an expert at something, if you can humble yourself to start at the beginning in some other area, right? That's the right mindset. That's the kind of people that you want to be around. Those are the kind of people that are going to be able to have success and then replicate that success because they're right in the head. They've got the right intestinal fortitude to pay their dues to attain some level of expertise. I may have veered us off
No, there was no path. We're wandering on the mountain. We're hunting, right? We're building our tribe right now. If anyone feels like you want to be in our tribe, just comment comment down below. We'll see where if you've got 5,000 hours in something, we'll consider it. We'll consider your application anyway, right?
Right. You got 5,000 hours in something, you've got to be able to bring some kind of value.
It's true as well because a lot of people don't understand that even bringing some kind of value is better than nothing. But if there's an expert there, and they know better than you, actually it's better to turn off the mouth and just listen to the expert. Because that way you can, because an expert can be a massive shortcut with anything. It's like with us, I mean, we trust other guys that say to us like, hey, go and invest in this, or take your money out of this thing right now. And we trust these guys with our everything, with our finances, with everything. And it's just a message that they send, and they're like, right, okay, guys, yeah, this thing's going to shit. So you might want to consider, saving your asses. And we trust those guys, just like those guys trust us in other fields. And being humble, I think, is certainly one of the words, but also being competent in as many fields as possible is certainly good, right? It's certainly good. But if you can only kind of do lots of things, then you're only kind of bringing value, I think. If you can really well and do something extraordinarily or exceptionally well, and then you have this, plethora of other things that you just so happen to be, well trained and have experience in, I think that's someone I want on my team.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've gone through the journey of attaining a level of expertise in a valuable thing, then the other thing, the perspective that gives you, is the respect for somebody else who's done the same thing in a different area. They've done the same thing, right? There's no, oh, that guy's better than me, or I'm better than him. It's like, hey, I bring this to the table. That guy brings something else to the table. Together, as part of the tribe, we're better for it.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, here's a good question. What do you think because a lot of younger guys watch a lot of these interviews, what would you say would be the best skill? I say skill or habit or the best thing that they could say, right, okay, I'm going to become at least an expert in this. What would you say would be their best thing?
Wow, I don't think there's one right answer. I think there could be many. You know what? I would almost say this. Figure out between 3 and 5 things that this could be, and put yourself in a situation where you can spend time on it, and find a mentor who is not just somebody that knows more than you, but who is somebody that is it brings wisdom to the table. And then really, and I to avoid the question, Michael, I could rattle off 10 skills, but I really think it's more important that you put yourself in a situation to spend the time, and that you surround yourself with at least one person who is a strong mentor, because that's one thing that I think I missed out early in my career. And I took what I would say a traditional path from university to WAGE, and I was wildly successful going that path. But the one thing that I never learned or was never taught to seek out is to seek out mentors. And now that I've been able to connect to them later in my career, and I've actually been able to be a mentor as well later in my career, immeasurable value of being able to put myself in that situation. Obviously, successful without it, but my goodness, I could have accelerated knowing what I know now about a mentor-mentee type relationship.
I mean, one of the certainly the things that I want to say, obviously, just to have this on camera as well, just to say thank you for being a mentor, not only for me, but a lot of guys that we know as well. So I just want to say appreciate that deeply. Absolutely. Because a lot of the time, I think that's missed a lot of the time because everyone's so busy and we kind of forget to just actually say small things like that. But how would
Michael? I mean, one is if I've said or delivered things that have been beneficial to you, then you're welcome, and I'm happy to do it. The other thing that I've figured out, I'm 53, and the other thing that I've figured out as I've made more trips around the sun is doing what I can to leave a legacy, doing what I can to make a positive impact on things is much more rewarding and much more top of mind than say 15 years ago. So I'm always looking to do that. I'm always looking myself to make myself available to that. But again, a little bit about what we talked earlier is I'm very open to doing that when somebody has positioned themselves in a way to take full advantage of that, as opposed to just taking advantage of my time. But you know that as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things certainly which comes up for even just mildly successful men, but especially in the kind of areas where we are. It's how would someone go about showing you that?
There's a particular mindset, and some might call it a mind of steel. Some might call it a mind of iron. But there's a particular mindset that when people get their mindset squared away, they're so much easier and more efficient to work with them. If you catch my drift.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things. I don't think it is something that is shown to you. I think it's just something that you can see almost by the questions that someone asks.
Yeah.
Right. Because the questions are relevant. They're short. They're decisive. And I think really the most important thing, I wonder if you have the same opinion on this, but I think the most important thing to do with building that kind of a mindset, that metal mind, to build that, I think one of the most fundamental things is once someone gives you advice, you better goddamn listen to it and go for it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because a lot of people will just ask you for advice. They'll hear the advice, and then they won't take it. And it's just like, right, okay, so you've not only just wasted your time, you've just wasted my time, and all of that time that I've spent and that effort listening to your situation and blah. You've just drained my life source. Right.
That's true. And so what does that cause us to do? It causes us to maybe put up a bit of a deflector shield. But the words that come to mind, right, is the ego thing. And we all have egos. There's nothing wrong with a healthy ego. But the ego thing, right? To be able to drop the ego, drop the pretense, and open your ears and listen and absorb, and ask questions seeking to understand. And being present for the conversation. A couple of things come to mind, right? You want somebody who is, they start out humble, but willing to fight. And as you see them grow, the yoke is easy and the burden is light, so to speak, right? Where they, that's the arc that you want to see them.
Yeah. And I mean, for you, because now your focus is mainly on the legacy that you want to leave. I mean, you're still well on your path to world conquest as well, all at the same time. But I mean, how would you say, because you've got a family now, right? And how would you say that just having the kids and sort of having or being the father figure, how would you say that that's fundamentally changed your life in the good ways and the bad, because there's pros and cons?
Oh, it's huge. I've got 3 kids. My oldest is 22, and then I've got a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old. I'm on marriage number 2, and this one works. Let me tell you, it works. But it's ultimately humbling, and at the same time, I've never been a better father than I am today, and I'll be better next week, and I'll be better the month after that. I'm absolutely convinced of that. And I'll take you like where talk about being humble. Where it humbles you is, you're on your 3rd night of very little sleep. It's 3 a.m. in the morning. You're tired. You got to wake up and work the next day, and your baby's just shit the diaper, and you're waking up in the middle of the night. You get the diaper changed. Right when you get it changed, the baby shits again. And then you change it, and the baby shits again, and you think to yourself, I don't want to live right now, right? Why am I doing this again, right? But it's those kinds of things. You you have an iron mind, or you pull out what you think's an iron mind, and you just roll through it, right? And you get up the next day, and you do what needs to be done. And then the fact that you are that much invested in the health and well-being of that human, right? It's hard work, and you make a lot of mistakes, and you hope to learn from them, and as your path goes through the world, and in my case, I've got a spread of 12 years between the youngest and the oldest. You just get better and better, and then what's funny is, I see some of these young guys in the early 20s. I've got a kid that's 22. They're like kids, right? They're fully grown men, but they're also like kids, right? And I have to think to myself, that of where they are, put myself in their shoes. I was a kid once too. I was irresponsible. I had weird perspectives on the world. But with the right guidance and the right framework and the right, the folks that are willing to step up and work, it's amazing to be able to be a part of somebody accelerating their path.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things which is just, it's so beautiful. There really isn't anything like it. I'm not a father myself. I do have, where are we at? I'm at 9 or something godchildren that I've got now. So I'm hoping that no one's parents dies, because otherwise I've got a house fucking full, right? So, but in seeing and genuinely being invested in someone else's life, it's such a selfless thing. It's such a selfless thing, and there is nothing more selfless and I guess you could call it even more spiritual, right? It's kind of a spiritual journey as well, because I guess to a point, as you see them grow older and older and older, you kind of have to sort of come to terms in some which way that you're going to die, right? And that's for a lot of people, that's like a really taboo topic. And I just,
people don't like to talk about that. It's not a fun subject, and a lot of times, the first time somebody really has to face that is when their father dies, or when a trusted uncle dies, or something like that. It's the first time they really have to.
Yeah, 100%. And in fact, it's I'll tell you a funny story. Just as I decided, because obviously I live in Spain, I don't have any family here. I've got a couple of extraordinarily reliable friends, but that's about it, right? So I had to sort of come to the terms with that. I have my dog, and if something does happen to me, obviously I want to make sure that my siblings are well looked after, that everyone knows what to do, how to do it, and that most importantly, that my dog, who's my child, if you can call it that, it's fucking weird, right? It's weird calling a dog a child, but similar.
Well, tell you though, that dog would take a bullet for you, Michael.
Oh, she would. She is just the best thing.
Extreme value in that, right? Extreme value.
It's insane. And if there's God, the amount of shit experiences and good ones that I've had with her.
Yeah.
It's just where I didn't even want anyone else there. It was just great when it was just us and we were just chilling. And it's like now she's got this autoimmune disease, so I can't really travel much because if I travel, then she gets stressed, and then if she gets stressed, then it comes back, and then she can't eat or drink and blah blah. So it's been very strange, especially for me, from going from traveling the world, going here 1 week, going there another week, being to God knows how many countries I've been to now, like 50 or something, and doing all of this crazy shit, and then just to be like, stay at home now, right? But it's similar. It definitely grounds you, and I think a lot of those young 20-year-olds that you were just talking about, they lack that groundedness, and they lack that. Hold on a second, maybe I am going to die. Let me just sit myself down by myself and actually just work this whole thing out. And that's a very, very difficult thing for young men to do. And the story was essentially, I was writing my will, and I get a phone call from my dad literally the next day afterwards. He's just like, "Oh, I need your details just in case I die, blah, blah, blah." And literally, I think it was a year and 4 or 5 days later, surely enough, he passed away. So that was a very humbling thing. But certainly death, I think, is the most humbling thing that you could ever face as a man.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, I think Jordan Peterson, and it's not that his way is set in stone, but he talks about how one of the things that it's good to aim to be is the strongest person at your father's funeral.
I'll tell you about that exact thing. It was 2 days before my dad passed away. And interestingly enough, my brother and I, my little brother, I'm the oldest of 5. So we were on the phone for, I think it was about 4 or 5 hours. And I was saying to him, "Look, have you seen this Jordan Peterson video?" He's like, "No, I've seen so many of them, but this one I hadn't seen." So watch this, because this for me is kind of where I'm at. Dad's old. He's kind of getting ill, diabetic. Yep. He had a massive cut in his foot, died of complications, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And so he watches that video. The very, very next day, quite literally, my dad goes into the hospital. The day afterwards, he passes away. So when I got the phone call from my brother saying, "Well, he's passed," I said, "Okay, it's during COVID time, so I couldn't fly there immediately. I had to go through all of this bureaucracy and bullshit. But eventually I got there. And finally comes the day of the funeral. And surely enough, as we're walking in, I said to my little brother, "Hey, you remember that Jordan Peterson video? I don't know which one of it's going to be, because this is fucking hard, but it's going to be one of us. Let's see." He just looks at me and goes, "You're such a fucking dick." And we carried on with that. But that video genuinely gave me a baseline for it. And I think it's if anyone is watching this and you haven't seen that video, I highly, highly recommend it. And what other sort of tips have you got from just sort of I would say figures online? I was going to say gurus, but I fucking hate that word.
Figures online. I did for a while, maybe back 4 or 5 years ago. I did consume a lot of Jordan Peterson's content, and even some more the long form, right, where you get the context around it. I think it's. I'll go one more Jordan Peterson, where he looks at it and he says, "Hey, you know what? Aim high and aim to do the best good that you can do in the world," right? Because if you live a life the best version of your life, and it makes the pain that lives in the world not just tolerable, but more than tolerable, then that's the kind of life you want to live. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, but aim for the highest good you can do, because life is suffering. So aim for the highest good you can do and make it a little bit better for you and those around you.
That's a good one, because I think what's going to be a really nice wrap up is, what is Steve's Jordan Peterson piece of advice? Something that you've, through all of these years and through all of these lessons, what would be your biggest piece of advice?
I think about leadership, Michael, and how people get asked this a lot of times in, say, interview questions. What's your leadership style, or what maxims do you believe in? And maybe it's just my style, but I feel like if I could build myself into the kind of leader that I want to be, maybe think about the kind of leader that you want to be, and work to build yourself into that. So for me, I want to lead from the front, and that means that I'll roll up my sleeves and I'll get on the business end of a shovel and start digging, if that's what needs to be done. The second thing is to make sure that what the mission is, and for those around you, they know what the mission is. What are the mission? What are the goals? What are we trying to accomplish? And then finally, make sure the communication lines are open. So whether it's an internal communication with yourself, make sure that you're shooting straight with yourself, and that you're shooting straight with the rest of the team. So when I think about it from an individual perspective, I want to have those qualities. I want to build myself into that type of a person, so that I could then become that kind of leader. Then I think that puts me on a better path than not.
I don't really think there's any other way that we can really tie that off. I think that was just a really, really nice end to it. But I know that you've got about 50 other meetings that you've got to go to one way or the other today. So I genuinely appreciate the time, Steve. It's going to help, I think, a lot of you guys. If it has helped you, definitely drop a like and a comment below. And also, if it has helped and you want to reach out to Steve, or just send him a thank you message, where can people come to you and do that?
Yeah, my website is proveritysolutions.com. It's proverity.com. You can get a message to me there. And then you can also find my socials there as well. For those of us that are connected inside our extended group, you can reach me on Telegram, and you'll know how to do that. If you know Michael, then you'll know how to get in touch with me. And Michael, I just want to say I appreciate you having me on. I really enjoyed the conversation. I love the format, and looking forward to seeing more of your work.
Well, I have no doubt that I'm going to be having you on again. Zero doubt in that in my mind whatsoever, because it's always fun talking, but there's so much more, right? There's always so much more. Well, Steve, genuinely appreciate it. I'll cut the video here.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael.
Cut this one off. There we go. Stop.